Okay, here are the answers for Monday's starters. Remember, before we get started, that we use the percent proportion and we do the part over the whole, and that equals the percent over 100. And whenever we set these problems up, the first thing that we do is set up the two fraction bars. We put the 100 on the lower right. We look for a percent sign. Or a percent, and that goes over 100 if there is one. And there's an X if there isn't one. And then the last thing is that the of means out of, and that gives you the whole. All right, so when we start, I've kind of left myself a little out of luck here with this one, but when we start this one, we put the 100 down here, and then we're looking for a percent sign, and in this problem it's 40%. So that 40 goes over the 100 because that is 40%, 40 over 100. Look for the word of, and that means out of. So that tells us the whole thing is 238. And then we're trying to find the part. So that's where we're putting the X. Then we go ahead and do 238 times 40, which is 9,520 when we cross multiply. And then 100 times X is 100X. Those two things have to be equal when we cross multiply. If you don't know what that is, we've got our equation. We split it. We're getting the X so that it's by itself, so we divide by 100. 100 divided by 100 gives you the X. And 9,520 divided by 100 is 95.2. So we've got 95.2 is 40% of 238. We set the next one up. We put the 100 down in the corner. We search for a percent sign. We don't see one. What we do see is the word what percent. That means that's the thing that we don't know. So that's where our variable goes. We don't know the percent. We look for the word of because that means out of, which is going to tell us the whole thing. Out of 70 means there's 70 whole. And then 28 is my part. And then I cross multiply. 28 times 100 is 2,800. 70 times X is 70X. Those two things have to be equal. So 70 times some number has to give me 2,800. If you don't know what that is, you can set up your equation, split it. We're going to divide by 70. 2,800 divided by 70 is going to give us 40. 70 divided by 70 just gives us one X. So that X means that this is the 40. So that when I cross multiply 70 times 40, that's going to give me 2,800, and 28 times 100. So my percent in this problem is 40%. I set my problem up. I put my 100 here. I look for my percent sign. In this case, it's 34%. So I put that over 100 because 34 over 100 equals 34%. I look for that of, which means out of. Out of tells you the whole thing. That means I have 240. And I'm looking for the part. So then I cross multiply 240 times 34. Is 8,160. And then 100 times x is 100x. Those two things have to be equal. If you don't know 100 times something to give you 8,160, you set up your equation. We split it. We divide by 100. 100 divided by 100 just leaves me with that 1x. And 8,160 divided by 100 leaves me with 81 and 6/10. So 81 and 6/10 is 34% of 240. I set up my equation. I look for my percent sign. I've got 5%. That's 5 over 100. I look for my of. This says of what number? And that means out of what number? That means I don't know what the whole thing is. So that's where my x goes. And then 6 is my part. So then I do 6 times 100 is 600. And 5 times x is 5x. Those two things have to be equal. If you don't know 5 times some number to give you 600, you set up your equation. We split it. We're going to divide by 5 on both sides of that equation. So I have 600 divided by 5, and that equals 120. And 5 divided by 5 leaves me with that x. So 120 is my whole. So 5% of 120 is equal to 6. I set up my equation. I have my percent. I look for my percent sign, which is 110 in this problem. Then I look for the word of, because that's going to tell me out of, which gives me my whole, out of 150. And remember that if we have 110% of something, then my part in this one is actually going to be bigger than my whole because my percent is more than 100. So we have 150 times 110, and that is 16,500. And then 100 times x is going to give me my 100x. Those two things have to be equal. If you don't know 100 times some number to give you 16,500, then we split it. We divide by 100. 100 divided by 100 is just x. And 16,500 divided by 100 is 165. So 165 is 110% of 150. So it's more than the whole because I have more than 100%. And then my last one, I look for my percent, which is 250%. So I put that over 100. I look for the word of. This says of what number, so that means out of some number that I don't know, which means the whole thing is what I'm trying to find. And then I have 42 as my part. I cross multiply. 42 times 100 is 4,200. 250 times x is 250x. Those two things have to be equal. So I've got 4,200. 4,200. That equals 250 times some number. If you don't know what that number is, we just divide by 250. So 4,200 divided by 250 is equal to 16 8/10. And that's going to equal our x. And again, our whole is less than our part because the 250 is bigger than 100. So 16 8/10 is the whole thing. And because I have more than 100% of that, my part is bigger than my whole.